All right, it's 4:03, so we're gonna start right now. So hi everyone, welcome to the position paper webinar. Thanks for attending. So as you know, this is part of the virtual DOP program. And so we're going to introduce ourselves now. So hi, my name is Patrick Mel. I'm an ASG and I'm in 11th grade from Scripps Ranch High School. And my pronouns are he/him.
Hi everyone, my name is Caroline. I am one of the other ASGs this year. I'm a junior at Point Loma High School and my pronouns are she/they.
My name's Aaliyah. I'm the third ASG. I'm also a junior except I go to San Diego High and I use she, her pronouns. Yeah, I use she, her pronouns.
I'm Zach Sharev. I'm a senior at Scripps Ranch High School. I'm also the head chair of 6th Committee. I use he, him pronouns.
Hi, I'm Sophia Welsh. I'm staffing for Regional Security Council, or RSC. I'm a junior at Mira Mesa High School, and my pronouns are she/her.
All right, so before we get started, unfortunately, the SGs were not able to make it today, but that's okay. Our teachers are amazing. And also, if you have your cameras on, please turn them off. I don't think that's a problem right now, but these webinars are going to be recorded and posted on YouTube. So for people who weren't able to attend, they can watch the webinar. And we can't show your faces on the video, so please keep your cameras off at all times, because if you turn it on, you might suddenly pop up on the video. And if you have any questions throughout the webinar, please feel free to type them in the chat and we will answer them. You can send them privately to any of the ASGs or just to the teachers. So, yep, we're going to get started now.
Okay, so position papers. Okay, so this is our agenda for today. First, an introduction to what position papers are. Then we're going to cover all the paragraphs of the position paper and some things to remember, and then examples. So part 1, introduction to position papers. Why do we write position papers? So first of all, position papers are a formal way of organizing research. And there's 3 things that we want to get research on. First of all, you have to understand the issue. You have to know the causes of this issue and why it's important. Then you have to know the international efforts. So what has been done about this issue already, and what has succeeded and what has failed. Then your country policy is the most important part. It's how your country views this issue and what should be done. So all the previous parts are going to come into play here, because you have to understand what is the issue exactly and how your country views it, but also how your country views the efforts that have been taken to try to solve it. And now, with all these, you can come up with your unique solution to your country. So, paragraphs of a position paper. So, paragraph 1 is the topic background. So, the topic background is a brief summary of the committee topic. You need to identify the aspects of the topic and show your understanding of it. So this includes statistics and definitions. You want to define specific terms that are relevant to the topic and statistics that show its relevance. And I would also include in this section, if it's a long-lasting issue, the history behind it and how it became so important or so problematic. And then second of all, what's really important, and then it also ties into history, is the causes and the obstacles of the topic. So why did it arise and what keeps it from being solved? And then after you write this paragraph, you want to ask yourself, so what? If you can ask yourself that question and it sounds ridiculous because you have written a beautiful first topic paragraph, then you have succeeded. You've succeeded in showing that this is something of importance, of consequence. And that's really important for the first paragraph, is to show that this is an issue that needs to be solved and that it's a complex one that has certain subtleties to it. And the last point is make sure you show why the issue is being discussed and discuss the potential problems that may arise if it is ignored. That's the first paragraph. Now, the second paragraph is past international actions. And what we mean by international action is anything done by the international community to address the issue. And this includes the actions of the United Nations. So things to look for when researching are events, programs and committees, resolutions, treaties, or agreements, and lastly, significant contributions by countries. And for this last point, the significant contributions by countries, it's not merely involvement in the issue, it's solutions to that issue. So I'm going to use the example of the Yemeni civil war. You might not know what that is, but basically it's a war. You don't want to just be looking at the countries involved in the war or what they have done in the war. You want to look at the countries that have tried to solve this war by creating a peace treaty or an armistice. That's what you want to look at, or providing humanitarian relief, not just involvement. Okay, and then the questions you should ask yourself for this topic, for this paragraph, and what this paragraph is answering is, has the UN taken action? If not, why? Who is involved? And then what alternatives are there to modern solutions? I would really take note of that last question. This whole paragraph is supposed to be about the past international actions of the international community. And you need to analyze where these actions have succeeded and where have they failed. Because by doing that, you'll get a good understanding of how you should go about solving the problems, of what solutions you should propose in the conference. So that's very important, because you don't want to propose something that's already failed or something that lacks any form of complexity, especially when dealing with complex international problems. So the third and most important paragraph is the country policy paragraph. So country policy is what your country believes should be done about the issue at hand. What you need to do is show what your country believes and how they have interacted with the international community. This is very important. You have to show your country's opinion, not your own. And this is especially relevant if the country you're representing is very different from the United States, because it's easier to think from the mindset of someone in a developed Western nation. But you need to, especially if you're representing a country that's not those two things, you need to change your mindset and really try to understand what that country wants, and not just your own biases as a person from a Western developed nation. And also, I would add to that, especially if your country's actions, if you think that your country's actions are immoral, you really need to try to distance yourself from your own opinions about that issue and understand why that country behaves in that way. But another problem is not just distancing yourself from your own opinion, but finding the policy in the first place is pretty tough. So, if you cannot find your country policy through your research, just by researching statements or actions that your country has taken, then you can do these things. So you identify your allies and then determine their policy. You align your policy with theirs, and then corroborate your information and make sure that this constructed policy is accurate. And I think a good way to go about this is looking at what actions imply. So if your country might not make a direct statement about the issue, but if they support a program or get involved or sign a resolution paper but don't make a statement about it, that implies something. It might imply support for a specific idea, and those small actions are very important for determining your policy, because you probably aren't going to figure out your country policy by just typing in Iran's policy on blank. That's not really sophisticated. You have to look at the general strategy that this country is taking in regards to this topic. So, things to keep in mind. First of all, formatting. Correct heading, and we'll get to that in examples. Times New Roman, 12-point font, 1.15 spacing, and clear paragraphs, indent at the beginning. We don't want a block of text. And then page limit. The maximum page limit for position papers is 1 page. And this may seem hard, or when you're writing it, it may seem hard because it's a lot of information to include, but it's really imperative to be able to formulate your ideas concisely in JMUN and beyond. So, and it's much more useful as well. If you can concisely state a complex idea about your country's policy in regard to an international problem, you're going to be very successful in debate, because you need to think on your feet. You need to be able to formulate a whole speech in the debate at the spur of a moment. So if you have this concrete idea that's also nuanced about what your country believes, it's going to be really useful for formulating your speeches and resolutions. So that's very important, to be concise. Now, this is a position paper organizer, and I'm actually going to go to the link for this. Okay. So, this is the position paper organizer. I hope this is okay. So, can you guys see that? Yeah? Okay. So, this is to organize your paragraphs and the information. So, you'll have these questions that will help guide your research. And this is really useful when it's kind of this big, vague problem that you need to try and understand. So what led to this problem or situation? What created this problem? These are very good. And I think this is really worth noting, is only consider modern times, because I've seen many position papers when grading that start with something like "from the beginning of time" and "man has struggled to find water." And that is not how you want to start a position paper. It's not, you don't want to make this weird, vague statement at the beginning or try to go way back in history. You want to convey why it's relevant now. So it's a balance of going back in history to understand the underlying causes and showing why it's relevant. So that goes into importance and impact, I would say. And then international involvement. So yeah, how the United Nations is involved is very important. The actions, and NGOs is non-governmental organizations, so this might be something like a non-profit that's involved with the issue, that's doing work. And then showing specific actions of countries, of independent country, like independent from the United Nations, is also very good to show their policy and how that has either hindered progress or advanced progress in solving the problem, and how these actions have been successful. Yeah, and then this little point over here, consider resolutions, conferences, and other actions. That's really important for considering the general international consensus on this, especially if those resolutions are widely supported. So now, your nation's involvement, super important. And right here, it says look at it from your country's point of view. It's very important to think from your country's perspective. So don't forget that. Now, yeah. And one thing that you can include is the actions that your country has attempted to implement within their own country. That's important, and also internationally. But sometimes it's much easier to find how this country has tried to solve this problem in their own country. So I think that's definitely worth noting. Yeah, and what solutions or resolutions does your country support? Very important as well. And financial support, military support, sanctions, allies. Those are good actions that show what this country is willing to place its opinion on. If they put in a bunch of money to a specific program for a solution, you can tell that that country is committed to that, or that they find it important, especially if it's a large sum of money. And then, just your research. And especially if you can find a good a good resource on the topic, a specific resource, like some UN reports are very detailed and provide a lot of information. So if you can find something like that on the topic that you're speaking about, it's very useful. And these reports can sometimes be like hundreds of pages long. So they're long, but if you can find specific parts of it that are relevant to you, it's going to be a gold mine, essentially. So that's very important. Now, back to the presentation. Oh, what am I doing? Okay. Now, example position papers. We'll go to the separate link for that.
Just a couple of things to add on to that, especially when you are doing your background guide. Be very careful that you're not being too vague, and we'll go over a lot of that with the position papers, but try to be as specific as possible with your research. Making a lot of generalities isn't as informative or show as much importance as a really specific detail or statistic will.
Okay. So Sophia, do you want to present the example position papers?
Totally. So just going over, we hadn't gone over in the heading in too much description, so we're going to kind of focus on that initially. You start off with your committee. So this one is the United Nations Environmental Program. Even though it has UNEP as its kind of acronym for it, make sure that you spell out the entire name of your committee and don't abbreviate it. And then you follow that with your country. So your full country name, not just Russia, the Russian Federation, or if you're like Ireland, you would be the Republic of Ireland instead of just Ireland. And then the last line there will be your subject or topic. So this one is about water conservation and quality. And so that's obviously super well done, super easy. You do not need to put your name anywhere in that heading. Just those 3 things is fine. And then you can start your actual position paper. So I'm not going to read the full position paper to you guys because it's a long paper, but we're going to go over the highlighted sections to kind of point out the good things that they've done. So they do start off with a quote, but what's really, really good is they tell who that quote is from, and it's a quote from a really involved person with this conflict. So it's the UNEP executive director, which is great. It totally helps if you have statistics or quotes from really good sources. Those are great to have in your position paper, and you'll see that the next line is once again a UNEP statistic, and that one deals with a specific percentage, which is great. Like we said, specifics are much better than generalities. And then that's your first paragraph, and they did this great. They have accurate statistics. It's easy to understand, and they made a very clear divide for where those paragraphs are. So it's easy to tell this is first paragraph, that's second paragraph, and that's third paragraph. And they did a good job describing, I didn't read it to you guys, but if you want to look at it, we can share the link to that later. They did a good job describing the effects this conflict has and the importance that it has worldwide, which is always good to look at if it's a worldwide conflict. If it's in a specific region, then you're just going to apply that to the region as a whole. Make sure that your position paper deals with the entire region or world if it's meant to, and not just one specific. You'll get into more specifics with your resolutions later. So the second paragraph, like Zach had been discussing before, is the world's involvement with this conflict, and a lot of times the United Nations involvement. And so this one starts off discussing a statement, which is good. As long as you say what's in the statement, you need to make sure that you just aren't saying, oh, they stated something on this, but you actually list what they were making a point of. And then it also discusses the Water Supply and Sanitation Collaborative Council, which is an organization that the UN is working with. So it's not just the United Nations, it's also the people that they're working with. And if other countries are involved, you would mention those other countries. And then it also talks more about the UNWC, which is another organization, which would be more information for you guys to include. They did a great job giving the accurate information of what the UN has done and what other organizations have done. So try not to just limit yourself to what the UN has done. Add in organizations that the UN works with that have been working closely in the global sphere for this problem, and add in countries that have done huge jobs. So if like the United States has done something really big for this conflict, and I'm not saying they have, but if they had, you would want to include it there. The next and last paragraph is on country policy. And like Zach had been telling you guys earlier, it's super important. It's super helpful for conference that you guys know this stuff, but it is hard to find. And so if you do struggle with that, like I said, you can look to alliances. Obviously, there's going to be more information out there about Big Five countries, so Russia, China, France, United States. Those countries will have it more information at their disposal. So if you're an ally with one of those countries, that's a great place to start looking. Or if you're part of a group like the EU, that's also a great way to start looking for that country policy. And so the first thing I'm going to note about this part of their position paper is they did not use I or anything. They used their country name. And so it's never going to be written in first person with I. It's always going to be your country name, which goes back to like, because this is your country's policy. And then it talks about what they have done involvement with the Water Convention. They signed it. It's a great way to help show your country's dedication to solving this issue is signing these resolutions, or supporting these resolutions and signing certain conventions. It will show support and that your country is dedicated to eradicating the problem. It's also, they have a resolution, which sometimes you'll find the resolutions and they'll be kind of hard to understand because they're written at very high level writing. But if you can understand them, make sure that you put what the resolution's on. And so put the name of resolution, this one's 54-175. Put the name and then put a descriptor so that people know what this resolution's about in case they've never seen it before. And then they also list a good source. So it's great if we know where your information is coming from. I would not ever list a source that's Wikipedia. I would also suggest that you look for the better sources when it comes to your position papers. So .orgs, .govs, those work better for sources. .coms you can still use, but it's oftentimes more accurate information when coming from one of those .orgs or .govs instead. So they have the CIA Wolf Factbook, which is obviously a well-established organization that you can trust the information from. And so they did a very good overall position paper. It was a wonderful job. They have all this green highlighting, which just shows you all the great things they've done. They gave you a variety of sources. Like Zach said, if you can find one really good source, use that one really good source. But variety is also great. There's nothing wrong with having multiple sources. And then they gave facts and statistics, and they even gave a quote, which is great at the very beginning. And they discussed in detail what the UN has done and what their country has done. And so they made fairly proportionate paragraphs, which is wonderful because that means you have good insight on all three topics. Yeah, so this one just overall was done really well. Then we'll go to the next one, which is still done fairly well, but not done nearly as well as the first one. It has that proper heading, which we looked at before, but it has a lot more generalities. So you'll see in the yellow heading, it says literally every human being. And the literally is kind of unnecessary in that you can just say essential to every human being. It works just as well. It seems a little more professional when reading it. And then the next thing, which is yellow, is cause a ton of medical problems. What we really want to know is what kind of medical problems this causes. So listing them afterwards would be good, or just causes medical problems like, and then you list them. As long as you have some sort of data to go along with that, it's totally fine. You can use that, but make sure that you don't just put that generality in there. It's so much more professional when you add in these examples. But they also do good things. So they use the United Nations CEO, which is a great source for a statement in 2014. And so they have a good source. But then they have more generalities again, where it's the UN has committed to combating a potential global water shortage crisis. Now, that's not bad at all, as long as you have a little more information with it. So when and in what matter. So have they done this through a resolution, through a statement, through a conference, something like that? And when did they do this? You have to have some sort of background data in order to make this a statement, because otherwise it's just more generalities and it's not actually helping you understand the United Nations direct actions. And then the last thing that they have in yellow is SDG6. And so, like generally they have had this issue, is a little more information on this. And so they could always put the entire name rather than just the abbreviation. So Sustainable Development Goals. Obviously that lets you understand better than the SDG6. Abbreviations are okay, but they're always not as preferable as the actual full written out stance, because that lets you make sure that you know exactly which organization you're dealing with. But they did put the parentheses in first, which definitely helps. So it's not like a bad thing that they did do this. They just could have continued on to use Sustainable Development Goals. The last paragraph where they discussed Israel, which is a lot harder than the Russian Federation to find country policy on. So the idea that they have no yellow there is really great. They have information coming from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which is a great place to get information on country policy. They also use actions that the country has done. They give an example, which is concrete and it's specific, and it helps to show what their country has done and what their country supports in fixing this issue. So this one, like I mentioned at the very beginning, it's the mediocre paragraph, position paper, not paragraph. It's mediocre position paper. It's not a bad position paper in any way. For a lot of first-time writers, it's actually a really good position paper where they have statistics and they have facts and they have accurate information, which is really important. But the goal is to refine these position papers, to get rid of the generalities and to include a bit more information on the importance and the time frame of when things happened. So it's, like I said, not a bad position paper, but it's not the goal. So the goal would be the first one. And then the bottom one, which is the last one we're going to look at, is the one that needs the most revision. And so you'll notice even initially it doesn't have that much information, and it's very disproportionate in the first paragraph and then the two other paragraphs. So you can tell that they put a lot more effort into their first paragraph because they have much more information. We want to make sure it's fairly equally distributed so you have a good idea of what international efforts have looked like and what your country's effort has looked like. And so the first thing which we're going to look at, because it's in bright red, is the heading. And so you can see initially just what I said, they put UNEP instead of the United Nations Environmental Program. And so just tell everybody you know that's doing position papers, it's easiest thing to do the heading. If you do it right, it's so great. Just full names for everything. So United Nations Environmental Program, and then instead of the USA, you would have to put the United States of America spelled out fully. And then they did do the last one where it was water conservation and quality. So that part wasn't done wrong in any way. And so they do have good parts. You can see the green. The green's there, so they still have these things where they have statistics. So they have less than 0.01% of the water on Earth available for human consumption, which is a great statistic. It definitely helps you understand just how important water conservation is. And then they also do this following statistic where it's 768 million people lack access to drinking water, and approximately 2 billion people lack water sanitation worldwide. And I think it'd be really important to know where that statistic came from. And so whenever you're going to do a statistic like that, which would have a huge impact, make sure you tell us where it's from and that it's accurate. So make sure that your statistics aren't like super inaccurate or they come from this kind of weird offshore site that's looking a little sketchy, just make sure it's an accurate statistic and you tell us where you got it from. It just totally helps your paper be more professional if you let everyone know where you got your information from. And then it also goes into more generalities because it affects many people in different ways. Love to know which different ways. I'd love to know how many people, like 200 people's many, or is it 3 billion's many? It's got a wide variety in that wording, and we'd love to have more accuracy in the phrasing. So make sure you say a more specific number if you can, or an estimate if that's possible. Which is, and then just like the last sentence in general, water conservation and quality is an important topic. Well, most people reading your position papers will already be well aware that it is an important topic. What they really want is for you to tell them what makes this so important. Its effect on the people is going to make it more important than you just stating it's an important topic. That should be the conclusion that we get from all your information, rather than it having to be stated at the very end. And so in the second paragraph, which is only a couple of sentences long, and it starts out with, the UN has tried to do many things. And so a general rule of thumb, if you have to say many things, you probably should not put that sentence in there. You should change that wording for something much more specific. So what the UN has done, has it signed or passed resolutions? Has it made a statement on water conservation and quality? When did they make those statements or pass those resolutions? It did discuss the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, which is great. That's a wonderful source to have, and that the UN has created and done for that. That part of that is great. If they had been able to put that and kind of put it into their first sentence where they discuss UN has tried to improve water quality through the 2030, or by the 2030. I'm sorry, I'm not phrasing this right, but they're trying to improve this water quality, and in order to do that, they have set up these goals. And so how they've tried to do it can get more general. So they've passed resolutions in order to meet these 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. That brings in much more information into, and you, of course, we want to specify the resolution into this second paragraph. And then another thing that they kind of did not as well is this second part right here, which shows the UN believes this is a pressing problem. We would love to see resolutions that have stated and what the United Nations views on it, because like a lot of times these resolutions will have a preamble where it's concerned about or alarmed by, and that would be a great thing to tell us where that came from. Did that come from a resolution or a statement? And if it didn't, make sure that it's not put in a way that makes it seem like you've gotten this information rather than you've just summarized it, and that's kind of the impression that you got. So make sure that it's coming from a direct source, that it's coming from a resolution or a statement, rather than you just saying it's a pressing problem. They did do another good thing in this paragraph, and that is the UN Water, which is here, which is another kind of organization or subcommittee that the United Nations has created in order to work on this issue. And so that is a great thing. If you do see anything where they have created an organization to deal specifically with the problem, make sure to mention that. That's great, especially if you're going to use more information on that later. So you could go on and say exactly what the UN water has done in order for to solve this problem. So the last paragraph is on their country policy. And so it starts out kind of in the yellow, and you have the United States knows the impact of lack of water conservation and quality. And that's again kind of a summarization of United States policy. It's not utterly the worst because it does delay some of your country's viewpoints, but it would once again be great to know where these viewpoints came from. If you could just include some more information on what your country has done in regards to signing resolutions or making statements or joining agreements, or even what your country does in its own borders with legislation and stuff like that. That'd be great. You'll notice the next thing in red, which I'm sure everyone's gonna make like some grammatical mistake at one point. We all do, but it's really a good idea to go over and check these for grammar mistakes, so we don't have like little bleeps in red like this. So they spelled state wrong, which happens. You just press one too many T's or something, and it doesn't autocorrect. It happens. Just try to look over it. Maybe have a friend look over it for grammar errors, just so you guys don't have to worry about having grammar errors. It just makes it easier for everyone reading them. And then they do also have good things in this paragraph, which I think is important to note, that they mention how the United States signed the Water Convention, which is important, like Zach had mentioned, and I've kind of been reiterating over and over again. Signatures are super important. They show support for trying to fix a problem in a certain way. The same thing applies to the resolutions. If your country has put forward a resolution or has signed a resolution or supported a resolution, it's great information to include there. And then the last thing in red is once again another typo. So it's just problem instead of problem. And they're fairly easy fixes, so it's just fairly nice if you can go over them like right before you submit it. Just make sure there's no grammar errors. It's just really helpful for when your staff has to read these, if they can understand it fully, because there are no grammar errors. I think that's about it for the position papers. Zach, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, so if we go back to the presentation, so this is the next steps, but one thing I forgot to mention is how this differs for people in different committees. So for General Assembly committees like First or Sixth Committee, you will follow this same process of writing position papers 3 times each, and it's a different position paper for each topic. So you'll have one for topic 1, one for topic 2, and one for topic 3. That's important to note that's for General Assembly. For Regional Security Council, you will be able to write up to 3. So you choose how many you want to write, but then the max is 3. Okay, and you choose which regions you want to write about. And then for Security Council, you only write 1 position paper. Okay, so that's just one note that I wanted to have. And then the next steps: finish your position papers, go to committee office hours for feedback and questions, and then learn about your country, and get ready for the resolutions webinar at January 29th, 2021 at 4 p.m. Also, I don't know if so Sophia, could you share that link, or maybe I'll just get it.
Oh yeah, I can do it. I have it. I copied it earlier.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Then could you share that in the chat? What for the position paper organizers and the position paper examples?
I put the graphic organizers in that chat, so everybody here, it should go out to everyone. You can access that, and you can, like Patrick said, you can make your own editable copy, so you can put all your research on that. You don't have to worry about copying, it's already made. And then the next one is in a bit more detail, what I discussed earlier, and you can read them fully. Access is denied. To which one? To both of them or just one? The newest link, okay. You might have to access them from a non-sandy.net account. So, because they were given to us. Yeah, you can't look at it from your sandy.net account or your school device. So if you have a home computer, that would work really well, and a separate Gmail account. If not, we can talk to the ASGs about that, because they did end up creating these documents, and see if they can give you guys access. Yeah. And then, of course, the website has contact information, so if you can't get to that, yeah, if you can't get to it, just continue to let somebody know, and eventually they will definitely get back to you with a link for you to use.
And does anyone have any questions about position papers, how to go about writing them, how to go about researching them?
And feel free to use the chat, or like raise a hand. I think you have like a way of doing that on here, or just turn your mic off and ask.
I just had a real quick question just for clarification. So depending on which committee you're on depends on how many position papers you have to write.
Yes. So, like Zach said, for most General Assembly committees, which you'll have is 1st, 3rd, 4th, 6th, UNEP, UNDP, who I think I'm missing some. But basically, if you are not part of Crisis Security Council or Regional Security Council, you're going to do exactly what Zach said in doing the 3 position papers, 1 for each topic. If you are RSC, you have 5 big topics to choose from in their regions, but you only have to do 3 position papers, so you get to choose between those. You get to choose 3 of those 5 topics. And then, like he said earlier, Security Council, you only have to write 1 position paper.
Okay.
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 Yeah. I'm sorry if I butcher your name. Curtin Mariah?
Yeah. I was wondering, what are the 3 topics?
So they'll change depending on your committee. Do you know which committee you're in?
RSC.
RSC. Awesome. So I'm going to be part of your staff for RSC, and you actually have 5 topics, and you have regions. So you have Latin America, which is parts of North and South America that generally speak Spanish. And then you have the Asia Pacific region, so China, Japan, that kind of area. You have Sub-Saharan Africa. That's where you would, most of Africa would be included that. And then you have the Eastern European Caucasus region, so kind of Russia, Ukraine, into like Georgia and Azerbaijan kind of region. Did I list 5 or did I list 4? But I can definitely get you more information on that.
Yeah.
If you want, there are office hours for all of your committees. If you are confused at all about your topics, I totally suggest you go to those. even just if you're going to stop by for 5-10 minutes, could be really helpful.
And one more thing I want to note about position papers that I forgot to mention earlier is that this is formal writing, and we've kind of gone into that, but it's formal writing, so that means no first person statements, as we said, but also no statements such as a ton. You know, when we saw in that position paper where the position paper just says a ton of medical problems, that is not formal writing. You want to have a formal tone when writing these position papers, because that's the same tone that you're going to be using to argue in debate. That's very important, especially referring to your country in the third person, like Russia believes this, is very important to get into the habit of doing, because it's just habitual to say I believe when you're stating something. So I wanted to note that.
Yeah, another thing to note, and unless this has changed, and I hope I'm not giving you incorrect information, you do not need a bibliography in MLA format or in any format at the end of your position paper. Do not feel at all a need to include that. You kind of list while you're going the sources, just like CIA fact book or something was the source that you had, so you didn't have like a link or anything. You just had a general where this information came from. You don't have to put it at the end, and I suggest if you are going to keep track of your resources, you keep track of them for you, and so there was like that part at the end, so you can go back and you can click on it in case anything changes or in case you want to verify information.
Is there any more questions?
Are these slides going to be made available after this meeting?
This whole presentation, I can share the slides right now, I think. But
we're going to make a copy for them later. But yeah.
Oh, really?
Shared with them.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I think the whole presentation is also being recorded as we speak, so it's going to be on YouTube later. So if you need to go back over something, that's available. It's also available for people who couldn't make it. Okay. I will get to you. I see your hand up. I think. I'm going to answer one from the chat first. In General Assembly, do we need to do all 3 position papers?
Yes.
I would highly suggest doing all 3.
Yeah.
I understand like it's a decent amount of work, but it's so worth having that information.
Yeah. And you don't want to, because in debate, we're going to be voting, or the committee will vote which topics they'll do first. And if you only did one position paper and the committee decides not to do your topic, you're going to be left in the dark in this topic. So it's very important that you do these position papers so that you're knowledgeable, because it's much more fun if you're knowledgeable. If you don't know what's happening, it's kind of nerve-wracking because you'll never know what's going on. You have like no control in debate about what's going on. So I would definitely suggest doing all 3 of them. And really, right now it seems like a lot, but once you get into the rhythm, I think you'll find no problem in doing all 3.
Yeah. Hope, I think you have a question?
Yeah. So one of my questions was, when we're putting down the websites that we're stating from, does it have to be specifically from the United Nations? Because I've noticed a lot in the papers that you were showing us that it was just like the United Nations, not any other website.
Well, United Nations is a great source, which is why you saw it a lot. There are other great sources, and you can most definitely use other sources. It's just the United Nations that appeared so much is just because we're doing model United Nations, so it's super easy to get your information from these topics because they're already involved the United Nations is already involved with it, so it already has a lot of the research and a lot of the statistics that you're going to find. So it's just kind of easier to do it that way. There are definitely other ways, other sites that you can use for information. Like, I think there was one where it was like the CIA or like the Foreign Ministry. Those work just as well.
Sometimes it's actually much better to get information from other sources than the UN, because the UN has its own biases. So the UN might say, oh, we're doing really well in this problem, but another country will criticize what the UN is doing. So including a variety of sources is definitely much more desirable.
Anything else? Would you like a footnote at the end of each page for bibliography? No. You do not need an MLA formatted paper like that. Like they said, formal writing, most definitely, but you do not need the end of the paper bibliography or the footnote.
All right, it doesn't look like there's many questions left, so I just wanted to say thank you to the teachers for teaching today. If you want, you can just clap behind your computer screen even though we can't see you. Don't turn your cameras on. Or you could like leave one of the clap reacts or something. But thank you a lot to Sophia and Zach because that was a really great presentation. And as we said earlier, this information is going to be shared with you and there's going to be a YouTube channel. We'll send that out and you'll be able to have this information later. If you do have any questions, you can definitely stick around. I'll definitely be here. And if not, teachers, do you have anything you want to say?
Good luck.
Good luck, but also thank you for coming. It's great to have you out here, you know, trying to learn some stuff, even if we're only doing webinars. So I really appreciate you guys trying to learn more about MUN. It makes me really excited for the conference. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys for coming. It's great how many of you guys showed up.
Okay.
And don't forget, Sophia mentioned this earlier, but going to the committee office hours will really help in case you do have any more questions. You can, for example, if I was in UNEP and I had a question about a specific committee, I could totally just drop into UNEP and ask questions about it. And then my position paper could be way better than if I just tried to do it by myself. So you should definitely try and take advantage of that. You can find that on the website and you can ask your advisors about it. But also, you can also contact your staff members. So on the website soon or already, there's going to be contact information for your head chairs and you'll be able to talk directly to them. So thank you all for coming. You can go ahead and leave if you don't have any questions. And if you do want to ask us anything, you can stay behind and ask us. And have a good weekend. Bye, everyone.